So, Mary, it's a nice Sunday in July.
It is. We got to take off our glasses and say hello, everybody.
But then I'm putting them back on because otherwise it's too bright.
That's right. I agree.
Yeah, and they know what we look like anyway.
Exactly.
Now,
exactly.
Now, today we are here on the
History Files.
And Mary, remember last year when we shot the program about the Lee Schoolhouse down at the fairgrounds?
Yes.
And we went in and we looked around inside and talked about it. Well, I thought today it might be a nice follow-up that we would go out and look at the area that it actually came from.
Oh, that's a good idea.
And it's interesting because Lee Schoolhouse was actually over the line into Jackson County.
Oh.
Okay.
Or busting out of Trempealeau County again.
Busting out of Trempealeau County again. So we are here up above Ettrick, and we're going to be on County D as in dog,
yep.
I guess. Okay. And we're going to be going down the road, and this is not Name That Road for all of our fans. I mean, okay, there's probably some people now that just got up from their chair and walked away.
Well, you know, we've got to spread it around. We got to share the love.
That's right. So we are going to be going out on County D, and we're going to get over into Jackson County, and we're going to look to see where the Lee Schoolhouse was. And of course, the schoolhouse got moved down to the fairgrounds in 1967, so there's nothing left of it. It didn't get recycled into a house or anything.
But it is used.
Oh yeah, it definitely is.
It gets a lot of traffic during the fair.
It is.
And it also has secrets in the basement.
That's right.
Yes, big secrets. And if you haven't seen that episode, you have to watch the Lee School. That was a good one.
Yeah.
Mystery,
yep.
Replete with mystery.
Mystery files. But
there we
today
go.
It's not a mystery. It's just going to be a chance to go up and look at an area at a school that at one time I had counted at 1905 school souvenir where it listed all the kids.
Oh, neat.
They had 56 students.
Wow.
Yeah. Of course, as people tell me, they didn't all show up.
Okay.
At the same time.
Okay.
Lots of times the boys were helping at home, especially in the winter, and the girls too. A lot of the girls had to be home too. But still, 56 kids.
That's a lot of kids.
It's a lot of kids. So I guess we will push off here.
Sounds like a plan.
And we're going to go head down D, and we're going to go looking for Lee School.
Let's watch for traffic. The one thing you got to be careful on D, because people drive really fast. Well, people drive really fast, period.
I know. They don't all go as fast as we go when we're shooting these shows, because we don't usually go very fast.
And that's why it's always a grand adventure.
Right. Well, when you go slower, you get a chance to look at things, you know? Things that when you're speeding by at 60 miles an hour, you probably, you're going to miss a lot.
Sometimes people even miss those corners, Nancy.
Oh, yeah. So here we're coming down what they call Creamery Hill, and we're going to be coming into Ettrick. Now, I don't ever remember that creamery running, although when I was young, I probably just didn't pay attention.
Oh, right.
But it is still here. It's been remodeled a little bit, but this was the creamery.
And now there's other, kind of remnant type buildings over on this side of the Highway 53. Do you know what those buildings were? Did they have like the other part of Ettrick when this wasn't Highway 53 interstate?
Well,
was there, kind of like Ettrick was divided by a trail?
The road got changed. It used to be that when you came up on 53, you went right through downtown Ettrick.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, and then they redid the road, and that bypassed Ettrick.
Okay.
And right now, where we're going over the bridge, there used to be Lake Chapultepec. And,
and that's back behind us.
Yep, and they used that water power. They had a woolen mill and a feed mill. And then at some point, I think it was in the early 70s, the DNR said the dam was inadequate and they just had to let it go.
Had to take it down.
Yep, so there was people in Ettrick that suddenly had much larger lawns.
So you think it changed the tax roll, I would assume?
Well, who knows?
Yeah, if it's underwater, it's hard to say.
Yeah, that's true. But that was the end of Lake Chapultepec. So now we're headed out of town on D. And when we get out in this neighborhood out here, it's called South Beaver Creek. And as we all know, Beaver Creek goes down and goes into Galesville, and eventually it goes into the Mississippi. And one more thing as we're going out of town here, I want you to look at Mary on our left, because there is a beautiful micro barn back there.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
Sure enough.
Isn't that nice?
Back behind the cream brick house. I love that house.
I know.
And there's another one too right across the creek.
Right, yeah. Mary and I, we're big fans of what we call the micro barns, the little barns that, Independence has gotten several of them.
Yeah, I think I've counted 8 or 9.
Yep, that's kind of like the capital for the micro barns in the county.
And we still have to do a show on them.
Yeah, I think that's something that people have kind of overlooked, and they're really pretty cool. Well, there's another one back in here too.
Yep, that's
the one that you were talking about.
There's that brick house.
Yeah.
I've got a thing for brick houses. Old houses in general, I guess.
And I love the micro barns. I just think they're really nifty. Well, here we are, and we are headed east.
Here it is.
Yep. And try as I could not find out who the Lee School was actually named after. I could not find anybody in the neighborhood that had the name Lee. But maybe they just thought it was a nice, easy name to spell. Who knows? Who knows?
Would it have been somebody's first name?
It could have been, but I'm looking, well, I should say the oldest plat book I saw of Jackson County was around, 1900 or a little before, and there weren't any Lees listed then that I could see.
This is some beautiful countryside out here, Nancy.
Yeah, it is, isn't it?
Still sprinkled with some cows. I see some cows here and there.
Some nice farms.
Yeah, and it seems like there's such a transition,
Well, and that's something I think that looking for Lee Schoolhouse is going to be something that we can consider, because it kind of shows how things have changed over the years in our agricultural landscape.
Most definitely.
Now, if we were to stay on this road, it would come out just above Melrose, just a little bit above where the town actually starts. And it's in the town of North Bend. And North Bend is another interesting village we'll have to go look at someday.
They used to have the most awesome supper club.
They did, and it's just too bad that...
they had a fire or something, didn't they?
Yeah, I don't know what happened, but it's gone. But that was a nice supper club. And supper clubs are kind of a Midwestern thing, which I never realized, but they've had programs on television about a history of supper clubs, and that was really not something that they really had out east or down south.
What, did they just have restaurants?
I guess so. But the actual supper club, where you could go out and have a few drinks and a meal and maybe listen to a band or do some dancing, that's a Midwestern thing.
No, don't you think that's because everybody was so spread out? They needed a place to go that was not necessarily a tavern.
Well,
because taverns have, in the day, taverns weren't necessarily, the best place to be. You couldn't really take your kids there because they were pretty much exclusively for men.
Right.
If you go back in history.
Right. And you know, people around here are very convivial. They like to visit. They like to go out and see everybody, especially if you're a farmer and you're back there on your land and you're spending a great time of your day, say, milking cows, taking care of livestock, and not really getting away. So it was nice to have a place to go out and actually have a little bit of fun and relaxation and have a meal. And for Mom, it meant she didn't have to cook or clean up.
And I think that was probably the whole best part of the deal right there.
Oh, definitely. Now, Lee School was moved from its location in Jackson County, and it was moved down to the Trempealeau County Fairgrounds in Galesville in 1967.
The year I was born.
Oh,
No, I'm sorry. I was incorrect with that statement. Okay, Nancy, continue. 1967.
well, at that time I was in high school, and I don't remember anything about them moving that schoolhouse down there. I wasn't really interested in stuff like that then. You know, I was more interested in my apparel and my hair, and yeah, I was a teenager. So
And your studies. Don't forget your studies.
Oh yeah. My nose was just in my books all the time. Yeah.
Top of the list.
Yeah. But that must have been quite the process to move that schoolhouse down there. And you don't see people doing that much anymore. I think, you know, for one thing, it requires a lot of permits.
Oh, to go across the highway?
To move something like that using the highway. That is a big deal.
Then there would have been that 53 was a highway back then too, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they had to come down D here and then on 53. So that must have been a major undertaking. And then they put a basement under it. And I think it is at Lee School's original location, there was not a basement. I don't think it was ever that fancy. And originally it was 1889 is when a man by the name of Bent Embertson, which is kind of a Norwegian sounding name, right?
Bent, huh?
Bent, yep. And he donated the land, and it was kind of down in the corner of his land. So we'll go on and look and see quickly where it stood. But he donated the land, but it wasn't called Bent School or Embrent School. It was called Lee School. Much easier to spell, I guess. I'm laughing here because I'm telling Mary that if she wants to sit on the hood of the car to get footage, she can. Although now we've got this nifty little GoPro that we can set up, and that takes pictures of us going down the road. She really doesn't have to.
She's taken away my camera roll.
Doesn't have to be part of the picture.
It'll be a robot show.
Yep.
But that won't be near as entertaining.
Probably not.
I don't think so.
Probably not.
I beg to differ. I think that would be an awful way to do a program.
And so far we haven't seen any wildlife crossing the road or thinking about crossing the road. No turtles.
No turtles on this trip.
I haven't seen any deer yet.
But we've got a lot of nice old barns.
Yep.
That seem to be no longer in use.
Oh, and what's this coming up right here, Larry?
And we've
Mary.
got, look at where we're at. Coming in high and fast, Nancy.
Coming in fast to
Coming in
Jackson
fast.
County.
Jackson
Here we
County.
go. And all of a sudden the road changed too, didn't it?
Yes.
Now, right here on V for Victory, if you decided to go to the right here, you would wind up by North Bend.
Up and over.
And this is South Branch, South Beaver, Lutheran Church.
Yes. I did a program out here once with Olin Femrite. And we let balloons off.
Oh, it's a beautiful old church.
It's a beautiful
I shouldn't
church.
say old. It's been, redone, but nice church. And Lutheran, considering most of the neighborhood was Lutheran back then, Lutheran Norwegians.
And that was the South Church.
South, they called it the South Branch, South Beaver. Now I think there's also a North Branch, Beaver Creek Lutheran Church.
I do believe there is.
And I think there's an Upper Beaver Creek Church as well. So that's good confusion there.
Well, and if the school had 50 kids, that would explain the 3 parishes.
Well, I always said that it didn't take many farm families back in the day to fill up a church or a school. People had larger families, and as time progressed, people didn't lose as many children, as many babies as they used to. So if you had 8 kids, probability is that they all lived. Unlike back in the older days, you probably would have lost a child or 2.
Or the whole group.
Or the whole group, that's right. Terrible epidemics and things. Okay, this area we're going through right now is, I would say it was a wetland on both sides.
Yeah, it looks like a beautiful wetland.
Because we're going up this Beaver Creek Valley.
And this is a long valley.
It is.
And then you go up and over.
So, coming around the corner here, we are coming to a spot that the name may have changed, but people used to call it the Block House. And it's kind of a tavern and I don't know if they still have meals or not.
Well, there's a light on.
Yeah, they're definitely open.
And this is Royville, population 3.
So when I was working in Jackson County at Black River, I remember a couple different times farmers coming in from the area and telling me about the fantastic prime rib and steaks they had there. They said they were so good. And it just seemed, kind of incongruous because it was pretty simple. It was a block house, more or less, but it supposedly had wonderful food.
Now we are starting to climb up.
A little bit. Now up here, where the sign indicates a road going off to the left, right on the other side there, and there is a home there now. I am pretty sure that is, all the plat books show that being the site of the Lee Schoolhouse. So I might be wrong, I am once in a while, right, Mary? I am occasionally wrong.
Which means like never, but we'll give it to her.
I believe it was right here on the right, where there's a very nice home now, but this was where the old school was. And it's right across from a road that's called Lee School Road. And it is a dead end, and we don't usually take dead ends, but today we're going to go up here a ways because I have to tell you a story. Well, there's Mary hanging out the window again.
Beautiful, beautiful wetland.
Yeah, on both
Isn't it?
sides here. Yeah.
Queens Anne lace is blooming away. Wow.
But there is some farmland here. So this would have been part of the Bent Embretson farm. And apparently there were a lot of other farms back in here of various sizes.
What are these purple flowers, Nancy?
Those are bergamot. They're actually a mint, and the bees love them.
So then is there honey minty?
It could be if you had a lot of them. Okay, behind us that would have been the Bent, part of the Bent Embretson farm. And then there were a lot of other families up here. And when I was still working for NRCS and FSA in Black River Falls, one day I got sent out to go look at some land that was in a federal program. And as I recall, it was this road. There's some kind of an old building up there.
Oh, that's an old one.
Yeah.
Can you stop? I got a little glare.
So I went out here.
That's a log. That's log, Nancy.
It's an old one, isn't it?
Cool.
Anyway, I went out here and I had my maps and I drove up this valley. And at one point, according to the map, I was supposed to go to the left. There was a little lane, not very much, but I got out and I parked, because I didn't want to drive where I didn't know where I was really going, what kind of a road. And I followed this, like a little lane of a path, but you could see it used to be a road or a driveway. And it wound up the side of the hill, and when I got up to the top, there was a full farm up there. There was a house, a barn, chicken coop, all the outbuildings, all deserted, and probably for a long time because everything was all weather beaten and gray and falling down. But at one time, there had been a farm up there. And when I was there, the farm was owned by some people that did not live around here, and they had put a lot of the land into FFA programs. They had planted a lot of trees, and that was what I was up there checking. But I thought this was really interesting because this farm, at some point, this was somebody's home. It was probably their
pride and joy.
Their pride and joy, their real dream. And I could see that if they were farming and dairy farming, and they probably were, that would have been really hard to get a milk truck up there. And lots of times in the winter, that meant they had to dry the herd up. And so there wasn't any income coming in that way.
That had to be a challenge, Nancy.
Yeah. And I don't know how many kids were in that farm or in that family. I think we'll just turn around here.
Yeah.
But maybe none of the kids were really interested in agriculture. That happens. Nobody wanted to take over the farm after Mom and Dad got too old.
Right. And you don't know how many times it changed hands either.
No.
And now we will caution you, this is a dead end.
Right.
This is a dead end road.
And this is not named that road, and we are not urging people to come up here. I just thought it was interesting to look at what the land is like. Now, the school was started in 1889, and that to me indicates that a lot of the people that came and bought land up here, probably in the 1880s, this was probably not considered prime farmland.
It was probably leftovers or cheap land.
Cheaper, yeah, that's right. It was probably, well, we can see it's wet.
Yeah, just by the species of what's growing out here.
Yep. And it was hilly.
Where, the Norwegians know hills.
And suppose you were coming from Norway, where you were renting more or less maybe a couple of acres, maybe 5 acres at the most, and you had to feed your family on that, and it was mainly rocks. For them to find something like this, although now we don't consider it prime farmland, to them it must have been, oh boy,
it must have been heaven.
Yes, here was a chance.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, but right now we're looking at it through our modern eyes, and to them I'm sure that this would have been a wonderful opportunity. Now I'm sure there used to be a farm here. Look at that. Those are phlox, those purple flowers.
Yes.
And those were usually something that people grew.
Right around the farmhouse.
Right, yeah. They're not usually a wild flower. So right now, it is a beautiful area here. It's a But it's a wild area.
And
isn't
look
it?
at the size of these trees.
Yeah, these big old oak trees. I think it's an oak.
These look like,
Well, maybe not.
the leaves aren't oak.
But it might be a cottonwood, but they're big.
Yep, they're huge. Wow. Yeah, and you can see tag alder and all those shrub species that like the wetlands. But you know, in the day, this was all grasslands.
There weren't that many trees. No.
No, there were trees. We had a discussion about that earlier. Trees were few and far between because of how the land was managed by how the Indian culture managed the grasslands.
Right, and they did because they burned
Yes.
on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And that kept the trees down.
And they were grazers, Nancy.
Yeah.
Only they used fire as their fences.
Right.
Well, you know, because if it burned, the animals had to move, but then it got green, and then what happened? The animals came back.
Yep. Yeah, that's right.
And there's our Lee School Road.
I'm pretty sure this is the location. Now, somebody might be watching this and say, no, that's totally wrong. But that's okay. We can be corrected.
Yes, definitely.
Now, if you were living up Lee School and you just had to walk down here to get to school, I'm sure that wasn't too hard. Kids were pretty good walkers back then, you know. They were good at kids were good at getting out and moving.
Yeah, well, they didn't really have a choice.
No. Most parents were too busy that they could not provide transportation.
No.
Now, I found out that the first teacher in Lee School was a lady by the name of Sophia Bibby. And she was 16 years old. And we don't know how many pupils she had, but I'm sure she had plenty. And at 16, apparently that was not a daunting number for her. Now, she married, and she had a daughter, Grace, and Grace went on to become the superintendent of Jackson County Schools from 1933 until 1940. So that was kind of interesting. And another teacher that we see in a picture of the school kids in the school in 1905, the teacher was a name by the name of Thea Nelson. And I read about her, and it kind of surprised me because she was the mother of a very dear neighbor of mine down on Decorah Prairie near Galesville, and that lady was Thelma Jean Congdon. And she was a 4-H leader, and I just thought she was great. But her mother had taught up here. Okay, now here we're going to take a right on Buchholz Road. This is not a dead end. Now, if we would have gone left...
You took that kind of fast. That's okay.
Oh, all right, I'll back up. There's no cars behind me, no semis, right? I'll put the window down.
Good. Sorry, got a little tickle in my throat there for just a moment.
That's okay. You're allowed to have tickles.
There we go.
There, can you get the picture? Buchholz Road.
There we go. There we go.
Okay.
Looks good.
And on one old map, it called this area here Buchholz Corners, although I only saw it on one map, so apparently it wasn't a real growing concern. Oh, look at the Turk's cap, the lilies.
I have gobs of those this year.
Yeah, they're having a good year.
They are.
Look at that color orange. You just can't replicate it.
No, that is beautiful.
Yeah.
Turk's cap. And this is kind of a wetland.
It is more than kind of. It is a wetland.
Cattails and Turk's caps and.
But I had always heard that the first settlers, they wanted marsh hay. You know, the grass that grew on the marsh. That's what they were looking for.
Well, they had animals to feed, Nancy.
That's right.
And there was no Roundup Ready alfalfa in those days.
No. Now on the left here, this is a state wildlife area. It might be on the right too, I'm not sure, but this definitely is.
It seemed like when we do name that road, we pass a lot of those state wildlife areas.
Yeah, well, we're lucky that we've got quite a few of them. You know, that's an important part of Wisconsin.
Well, we've got to keep a little bit of us wild, don't we?
Yep. Now back in here at one time, I'm pretty sure there was a farm, which is long gone.
Yeah. They slowly, or sometimes quickly, get reclaimed.
Yep. It doesn't take long before you got trees and brush and things are not standing up straight anymore. And
I call it ag waste.
well, if you don't live in a house here, if you don't heat it,
Houses need people.
doesn't take long before it kind of returns to nature. Or empty barns. Boy,
Yeah.
that's a candidate for blowing down in a storm.
Right.
Yeah, there's a place where you can park and go walk around out in the wildlife area. Now, Mary, I can back up there if you feel like getting out and walking around through the cattails for some interesting pictures.
I think we're okay.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you've noticed, but the deer flies are coming out.
But they're not bouncing off the window yet.
No, that was
Unlike some of our journeys.
that was kind of creepy, you know. And I was amazed that we actually captured those things because they're so little, you know.
Well, there were enough of them that last year, folks, we were on a couple name that roads,
And we got
the deer
mobbed.
flies were just mobbing us. They were bouncing off the windows. It was terrible. You thought, oh my God, if we had to get out here, we would be exsanguinated quickly.
Yes, good word uses. Have you guys noticed on this program, Nancy's really expanding our word horizon?
The word of the day, exsanguinate, which means to
Exsanguinated.
drain your blood. So,
Yes, there you go.
But now I did some research on the computer. I've got this program where you can type in certain phrases and it'll pull up different newspapers from really all over the country. And I put in Lee School, Jackson County, and there was a few little articles. In 1944, they had held an auction at the old school, but they weren't auctioning off anything at the school. It sounded like somebody was having an auction and brought their stuff in there and held the auction there. So, you know, schools were used for lots of different things. And then in 1952, one of the 7th grade pupils in Lee School, his name was Willis Pischke, he won I think it was a contest where he had written an essay on strengthening democracy.
Oh,
And this was a big thing, and he won a gold trophy. So that was saying quite a bit about how well that school and its pupils did.
yeah, we need to revisit democracy.
Yeah, I thought that was a good topic.
Were you able to find it? His essay?
No, I just found a little news bit, but maybe the Pischke family is watching this. They'll say, yeah, we've still got that essay, and it's framed, and we've got the trophy as well.
That would be fun, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would.
Yes, complete the circle.
Then in 1955, by that time the school was closed. It actually stopped functioning as a school in 1949. And I believe some of the kids went into Ettrick and some went over the hills towards Melrose and North Bend. But in 1955, they had held a meeting at the schoolhouse, and that was to encourage farmers to come in and discuss forming a soil and water association.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. So they were talking about new ways to farm and new ways to protect your soil. That's a neat old shed, isn't it?
Yeah, that's an old one.
Yeah.
Reblocked it on the bottom.
Now, we're probably getting to the edge of what had been the old school district here.
Okay.
And so I guess what we should say here is, what was it that changed so much in agriculture that so many of these farms stopped functioning as farms?
That's a good question.
Well, I suppose, and this is something that you've said before, number one was that there was new technology, especially after World War I and World War II. When so many of the men and boys were away in the military, that people started they used more machinery.
Yes.
And of course, tractors, a great time saver. You could do a lot more work in one day. However, that machinery was heavier and more prone to getting stuck than maybe the old draft horses were.
And it was harder to get bulk things to places. And
Right.
that's, more roads, the whole infrastructure changed.
Right. And if you were milking, and most people were, you had to be able to get that milk truck in there to pick up your milk.
Well, and before that it was cans, Nancy.
Right, and even canned milk. And if you couldn't get it to where the cream hauler could pick it up,
You were out of luck.
yeah, and that's how you made your money. So that was not good. Well, look at that farm, or that building over there. Looks like it's got a cupola on it. Can you see it?
Well, you'll have to do some digging, find out what that building is.
Oh, it's probably a barn, but it just, it's an old one. It looks like.
Oh, the adventures.
And I would imagine that lots of times the fields were much smaller. And when you got the small fields, it's easier to work that with horses or a small tractor, but as the equipment got bigger, then working those little fields was problematic.
Well, then, the conservation programs after the Dust Bowl really kicked in.
Yeah?
And so there was a completely different shift to, let's try to figure out how we can keep our water.
And our soil.
Yes, and our soil, and the whole 9 yards. And, a lot of the farms that had small fields, even in the 80s or the 90s, they got rolled into CRP. There's that little field over there that's
Right.
always wet.
Right. Or it's so small it's hard to turn around in it.
Right, because the machinery outgrew the landscape.
Right. And that does make a big difference, huge. And so when originally you could have like a 40-acre farm and make a living off of it, pretty soon that got to be something you just couldn't do.
Yeah, on that plat page that you shared with me really shows how small a lot of these parcels were.
Yes.
And on a small parcel that's always wet, you're really, really limited to what you can grow for crops.
And if you can't make any money farming, that's it.
Right.
What are you going to do? You can't just keep on losing money and losing money.
Exactly, Nancy.
So, the little rural school, like Lee School, like by 1949, they closed. Because I'm sure their student body was probably way down.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
And then there was transportation.
Right.
Easier transportation.
And here we've got a choice. I think today let's go left. And right now, do you see what we're in? You want to shoot past my head here.
This is South Buchholz Road.
Mm-hmm.
And then Nancy is insisting that I take the camera from one side of the vehicle, so I'm going to try to go slow and not make you all sick. And we're going to come over this way. We are in
the town of Franklin. Now, Lee School was in the town of North Bend. So right here we are apparently crossing into Franklin, and it looks like they're posting notices.
Okay.
It might not be real easy to get over there to read them, but
they're still posted.
they're posting them. That's great.
Because there is a Town of Franklin Hall.
Yeah.
So wouldn't they post them at the hall? Or maybe because it's a big township, maybe they...
Well, that could be. I'm sure they do, but I've just noticed that they had some posted there on the sign.
And here there's some nice looking ag crops.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
But as we maneuver further and further and further up the valley, as we're heading up, everything gets narrower and narrower, and the hills are steeper. And we forget that a lot of these roads were cut into these hills.
And a lot of these roads, if you look on the old maps, they've changed. The route has changed.
Well, they've had to because the size of the vehicles driving down them has.
Yeah, well, yeah. Now, suppose you were going to bring a combine down here, a modern combine with those big
16 rows.
Yeah, the big heads on them. They would take up more than the road, I would think.
It's wider than the road.
Right. And back in 1889, who would have thunk?
Right, exactly. They probably never would have settled it had they had machinery that size back then.
No, it would not have seemed like a real good deal. And then, of course, there was the market for land that was just kept wild.
Yes.
To be used as hunting land.
Yes, that's why we've extinguinated a lot of species.
Yeah.
Is that the word, extinguinated?
Exsanguinated?
Exsanguinate.
That means you drain the blood.
Okay. Well, we did that too.
Well, I'm sure. But that made a big difference where I go to church, and it's a rural church, and it used to be that everybody in the congregation was a farmer or had been a farmer, and almost everybody milked. But then came the time where they had the dairy herd buyout.
Oh, yeah, I remember that in '86.
So a lot of cows left, and people weren't milking anymore. And there were a lot of farms that got sold as hunting land.
Yes.
Which, I'm not saying that's good or bad, but it cut down on the number of people that were actually living in that neighborhood.
Or who were farming.
Right. That's right.
Because a lot of those hunting lands got rolled into CRP, and the government paid for them.
Yep. So that really changed things too. But I think our viewers, and maybe you, will be surprised where we actually come out on this road.
Well, you know, Nancy, the one thing I've learned riding around with you is that I don't never know what to expect.
But I'm sure you know where we are, right?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
Yeah.
I'm very familiar with this part of Jackson County.
Yeah. And Jackson County is such a big county, and it's so different. The western part of Jackson County is like this. It's hilly.
It's driftless.
Yeah, it is. It's hilly, and it's farmland. But then if you cross the Black River and get on the east side of Jackson County, what's that?
That is cut over. That's glacial outwash.
It is, and a lot of it is state and county land.
Yes.
And it's sandy over there, and a lot of swamp. And when you're driving around there, you could almost imagine that you were up in northern Wisconsin.
Yes.
So,
it's incredible that when the glacier ground up, it followed the Black River to a certain extent.
Yeah.
And then, of course, it missed La Crosse, too.
So this is a part of the state where, you know, the terrain changes, you know, radically in places.
Yeah, it's amazing what 100 billion, trillion, billion tons of ice
Can do. Yeah. Okay, we are.
Yeah, and this is a pretty quiet neighborhood. There's
Yeah.
not a lot of residents.
No, I don't see a lot of factories here.
No.
We're not dealing with semis or a lot of stoplights.
Nope. And now it changes. No, it's still Buchholz.
Yeah, it's still Buchholz. But you can see that we're on the other side of the hill.
Oh, a little more populated. We're
Yeah.
out of the woods.
Yeah, we're out of the woods.
Yeah, and it's hard to believe that all of this here was grasslands at one time, isn't
Yeah.
it? I mean, just imagine walking over the hill and seeing this without trees.
Yeah.
That would be quite incredible.
There probably were some trees, like knobs, and then down along, the bottomlands and the creeks and everything. But for the most part, there just weren't that many trees.
No pockets of oaks, because the oaks could withstand burns.
Yeah. And I'm sure watching this, well, here's some newer machinery, things that people back in 1889 when they were starting Lee School, they wouldn't have had anything like this.
They wouldn't have had a rake that would pull in two windrows all into one,
No.
or a nice little disc vine like that right there. None of that.
Nope.
Didn't they used to make hay with a swather? Or
Sure,
a
yeah.
scythe, right?
A scythe by hand, yeah.
Yes.
If you didn't have anything to cut your hay with, that's what you used, was a scythe. And then I think you had to rake it up by hand and, stack it up. So,
The horses could take it to the barn, and then you had a clamp on a pulley system
yeah.
that you would clamp your hay.
Although, I can kind of remember haystacks, too.
Yes, outside haystacks.
Yep, outside haystacks, a very vague memory.
Yeah, and here it's already changing a little bit.
Yeah. So we'll come down here.
On Buchholz Road.
Yeah, we're going to come to the stop sign, and then I think people will see where we are. And I believe this farm on our right with the greenhouse,
Yeah.
I believe that's an Amish farm.
Yeah, it looks like it.
Yeah, they're still farming with technology that probably would have been used back in the 1880s, 1890s.
Oh, definitely.
And still tend to have the big families.
And beautiful gardens.
Look at that.
And
yeah.
beautiful flowers. And cattle on pasture, although managed different, right? You know?
Yep.
Big strawberry beds, nice mixed, eclectic
And
variety.
it's a good place to end because here is a one-room schoolhouse.
Look at that.
Yeah,
It comes full circle.
it does.
We've got to get through the trees here.
There is the one-room school used by the Amish families.
There you go. Well, this has been such an eclectic drive, Nancy.
It is.
Don't you think?
We're coming up to the stop sign here, and the county road that's running in front of us is County C.
As in Catherine.
Yes, as in Mary C.
Mary C.
And some of our fans may recall that last year we did a program where we came over on County C and we came to this village that's ahead of us, which is called
Hague.
No, up the road from Hague.
Franklin.
Franklin, yes.
Well, we did Hague too.
I know. But
We did them on the same day, didn't we?
we concentrated on Franklin.
No, but we went through Hague too. Jeez Louise. We better start taking better notes so I can remember what we've done in the past.
Yep. Anyway, we're down here in the town of Franklin, and we were near the village of Franklin, which is behind us, and up ahead of us is Hague, which is still there. So that kind of, I think we've made the circuit there.
There we go.
And turn this around, I think.
And we are headed back into Trempealeau County. Here we are. Yay! Good to see you.
Yeah, so I hope everybody enjoyed our little odyssey today.
Our drive through a little bit of Jackson County, a little bit of Trempealeau County. No, we started Trempealeau, Jackson, Trempealeau.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Yep. And we took a drive back into the history of agriculture in this part, and the schools, and the old neighborhoods, which have changed radically.
They have.
Yeah.
They have.
If Lee School was still functioning, I doubt it would have 56 students.
No, I think it would be lucky to have a handful.
That's right. So anyway, as we roar down the road here towards Hague, we want to thank everybody for coming along on our journey, and this was our History Files. And up here, look what we're doing, Mary. We are coming back into...
Here it is.
Trempealeau County.
There's Trempealeau County.
The town of Ettrick.
County Road C. Woo!
Oops, there it goes.
There it goes. Show's over, folks.
Yeah. We just lost the GoPro.
We'll see you next time.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Never fails. Nancy, it never fails.
I know. I thought we had it stuck on there
Oh,
sometimes.
sometimes it's...